deal.
10 years from now,
And
I'm very
manufacturers'
curious
hands
to
are
see
gonna be tied.
what's going on in the disc golf world, sponsorship-wise. Because it can't be the way it currently is. It just don't. It doesn't make sense.
No,
Because right now it's all directly correlated, like you said, to the direct sales, and that's not a long-term thing. It can't be because
Right.
you can't have the top 25. Because as more parity increases, the number one player in the world is going to be a little bit more skewed. Because right now the number one player in the world is kind of dominant, but even last season it wasn't like that. This season I think it's going to be even less like that. To where you're not going to have a 2015 like you did of Paul, where the guy doesn't lose. That's not going to happen again. So then it's going to be like, okay, well, I can get anyone in the top 15, and they're going to have a shot at winning one or two tournaments this year.
Yeah.
And that's it.
So
then it's like, it's not so much directly correlated to being at the top, and it's also not directly. So then you have 15 people who all deserve a big contract, and they all have signature lines and signature discs and all of that.
Right.
And eventually people are going to be like, I think I'd just rather buy the stock Buzz than 15 different custom stamps.
It's like, because like the way it should work, right, is like you're, like in golf, for instance, like you're Titleist. You're not making, like Jordan Spieth plays Titleist clubs. You're not making the Jordan Spieth wedges, and those sales from those wedges are paying Jordan Spieth. You have those guys on your team. First of all, you're already a successful golf brand, so you have money to pay these players regardless. But then it's part of your marketing budget, essentially. You're saying it's worth it to have these guys on my team because it's going to influence buyers to buy the clubs that they are using. Whereas in disc golf right now, I guess the demand isn't enough just in disc sales, just stock disc sales, to be able to say, well, we can just have all these guys on Team Discraft and just them throwing the Buzz is going to sell the Buzz. We need to make sure that the money is directly lined up to them, and that's how we're going to pay them, by like basically creating extra discs that wouldn't have been bought otherwise.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's like it's extra discs because they know that buyers, they at least it was at this point where people would see new discs come out and they would just kind of impulse buy, like, ooh, I want to have the new thing, but it's going to get oversaturated if it just keeps happening, to where you're right, like there is going to be a line where people are like, let's just, buy the stock stuff, and then like what is going to happen? I don't know.
Well, I think the issue or the biggest difference,
they all fly the same.
Yeah.
So
the biggest difference in golf when I'm looking at that list is Jon Rahm. Yeah, he only had $6 million off course, but he still made $16 million this year.
That's what when I thought you were going to say that about the list at first when you brought it up, is if you noticed, a lot of those guys that are still the top players right now, the Dustin Johnsons and Jon Rahms and so on, they're all making more on the course than they are off the course.
Yeah, so
it's a lot of money.
Yeah, because you had Tiger Woods top the list, and he had 190,000 on course and 62 million off course,
and he's got lifetime deals.
He's not playing, and the guy's brand's worth more than anyone in golf. Still,
he's got lifetime.
Phil
deals
Mickelson, same type of thing. He had a very great career to where he's still one of the most marketable players, stuff like that. To where if you're outside the golf world, you've heard of Phil.
Right.
42 million off course. Once you get down below that, then you have like the
current guys.
There is
still some outliers,
there are some
though,
that have big time off course, but for the most part, off course and on course were pretty close together.
Right.
And that's where I think disc golf, the future growth is.
Yes.
Is like a company is gonna really needs to be outside companies, because it doesn't make sense for Discraft to be like, oh, well, instead of investing $1 million in a player this year, we're going to invest $1 million in the D-Glow purse.
Well, you have like,
that's not going to get the return.
You have like the different like levels of areas of disc golf and their popularity. You have the money players are getting paid, the amount of discs being made, and then the actual popularity of the sport. The popularity of the sport rocketed during the COVID boom of the sport, and then the other two rocketed straight past it, in my opinion.
I think so too.
They went right on past it.
They freaked out.
Yeah. Now what needs to happen is we're back to, okay, we need more eyeballs in the sport. We need more people playing the sport, so they buy more discs. Like we need that column
to catch back up,
basically.
Yeah. It's kind of like when we were in the middle of the COVID boom, people would ask me like, oh, how's your business going? How's your store going? I was like, I don't know. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, we're booming right now. I was like, but
no clue.
I don't know how much of this is hype and how much of this is like sustainable growth.
Things have settled down to more of a new normal now.
Yeah, exactly.
But in the midst of it, on the retailer side, we're kind of sitting back like, we kind of have figured out what our new normal is as far as sales, but the manufacturers are the ones that have all their eggs in the baskets.
Yeah.
They're the ones that have put all this money forward into these players, and they're the ones that are going to have to answer for that if it doesn't pay off, essentially.
Well, because that's what, like, in the middle of COVID, a disc came in and it was immediately sold.
Yeah, every time.
But it's because people had been waiting to see Lunas for 6 months, or they'd been waiting to see Truths for 3 months. And so Truth throwers were like, I don't know when I'm going to see it again.
Right.
But now that Disc are back just sitting on the shelf where
To
like
some
you
extent.
can get
They're
them.
still a little behind,
They're still,
but
yeah, but
it's gotten better.
For the most part, if you want to find a buzz, you can find a
it,
buzz.
right.
So now we've started to settle into a new normal. And now I'm like, okay, yeah, this is how much we actually grew. Because there was that fake growth. And like you said, I'm worried that some of these contracts were signed here.
At the fake growth,
And
right.
then it like leveled out. And now we're like, all right, we got to sell here. And we're like, okay, but we're not there.
We'll find out.
Yeah, it's
We
definitely-
will find out.
It wouldn't shock me.
And the thing is, too,
If-
the companies are for sure, like Discraft is for sure cash rich to
Yeah.
some extent. So maybe what they've just said is, you know, we're just going to sign big contracts, but these contracts are stuff that we know we can cover at the end of the day because we
Yeah.
made such a good profit. And maybe that's for that. They're just like, you know what? If we make it back, we do. If we don't, we are like have a security blanket of income that we made.
It just won't. What's gonna suck is if what we just said is right, and this is kind of like a bubble, and the bubble bursts and it goes back down, and like your player, like I don't know, let's say let me just pick Chris Dickerson. We'll use Chris Dickerson. Over the next 4 years, you become the number one player in the world.
Right.
And then 4 years are up, and you're like, all right, it's my time. He has a good deal, 4-year, $1 million, but it's his time to get his big deal,
Yeah.
and the bubble burst. And so now you're like,
You're going to sign a deal for less than
the
you had.
$250,000 a year was like, that's not what the number one player in the world's getting anymore.
Well, you
what the
gotta
heck?
hope that new players get
Or
into
like
the
if you
game.
peaked at the right point, you signed $1 million a year contract, like Ricky, Paul, and Eagle might be able to get that next year when I think his contract's up next year. So if you peak at the right time,
Right.
then you get this big deal.
Yeah.
Kind of like you just said with Rory and John
Right,
Rahm.
that's what I'm saying.
Like
It's all
Dickerson
about
might
timing.
be John Rahm, where it's like a few years from now, he's the number one player in the world, and he's like, the best deal I can get is nothing compared to what Ricky and Paul are still making.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
it is gonna
Very
be
interesting
very
dynamic.
interesting to watch.